People are starting to come in. I'll let a few more people join us. It's been kind of a crazy day, so I know I sent out an email to some of you that I knew about a little last minute. I didn't realize it was almost already 1 o'clock. Where's the day gone? I think it's nice out, so I'm hoping some of you are still willing to join me, even though it's, at least for those of you, most of you are in Washington, you could be outside with the blue sky. Right. We'll give people a couple more minutes before we jump into some financial aid and scholarship talks. Hopefully that's why you're here. All right. Okay, looks like the numbers have slowed down. But we'll do kind of a slow start like we're used to and see kind of as people jump in. Always remember there's a question to answer area, should be at the bottom of your screen. You can always ask a question of me or let me know if something's going on, but I will try to kind of save those till the end. But put them there because I don't want you to forget them. Again, for those of you that haven't joined me for one of these webinars already, my name is Melody Ferguson, and I'm the Associate Dean of Admission at Pacific Lutheran University. And this was a series of webinars that kind of came to mind from a couple of high school counselors who were great about helping me get this up and running, just to offer general college knowledge. So not anything specific about Pacific Lutheran University where I work, but just about college in general. So short snippets of information. So hopefully you feel a little bit more confident as you ask your own questions or kind of go out and start doing your own research. All of these webinars are being recorded and they are available on a YouTube playlist that I created. So I will make sure you get a link to that. So for example, if you came to this one but didn't realize we had one last week, no big deal. You can just watch it on your own time. But I may make references to those throughout this session so you might know what to go back and check on. So that is who I am and what we're going to do. Today's session is all about financial aid and scholarships, which I find is sometimes one of the most daunting factors for people as they consider higher education. And that also, someone's waiting to get in. I'm hoping, looks like, okay. So it looks like, okay, perfect. Looks like everyone's able to jump in. So before we get totally started, I'd love to see kind of who's here. So if you could answer my poll, I do this every time, just because it helps me maybe narrow this down to information that might be interesting to you. Oh, we have a really good balance this time. It's been the freshmen and sophomores have been holding it strong, but we have a lot more juniors and a lot more parents and guardians, which I'm not surprised about when it comes to financial aid and scholarships. But we are going to talk about how this needs to be kind of a family conversation. So thank you for letting me know, but just so you know, we have a few juniors, a few sophomores, a few freshmen, a few parents and guardians, and I think a couple of high school counselors. So that's great. All right, so financial aid and scholarships. So these are sometimes some of the reasons why we do this one. What are you even paying for? What will it cost you? Because yes, although there is a sticker price to college, which we're going to define, there's also a net price to college, which means that not everyone pays the sticker price and not everyone pays the same amount. And we're going to talk about why that is. But I do think it's important, especially for those of you that are younger, which most of you are, that you think about the fact that college will cost something. And so it's important that you go into it with that kind of eyes wide open, that there will be a cost to college. So it's more a matter of what can you budget, what can you pay for, what can you save, what can you apply for, kind of what combination of things will allow you to pay for college. But knowing about how much college is going to cost is going to be important as you think about that. Knowing what makes it so that you'll get scholarships, that's the free money, the money you don't have to pay back. And how is that net price, the price you're going to pay, how is that calculated? And so that's what we're going to kind of go through a little bit as we go through this session. So this is hopefully at least what we'll be able to start answering at the end of this 30 minutes. All right. So the cost of going to college is basically, it's two things. When colleges talk about how much it's going to cost to attend that school, they're really talking about direct costs. Those are the required costs of attendance at a university or college. They are things you're going to be actually billed for. So you'll get some sort of bill that you'll have to pay in one of the many ways we're going to describe. But I also want you to have a good conversation with your family and your student about their habits, especially spending habits, as it relates to indirect costs. So there are indirect costs associated with going to college as well. We'll define those in a second. But those are things that you won't receive a bill for, but you will maybe have to pay for while your student is at college or away at college. So a lot of families think only about direct costs, but I want you to think about the overall cost of sending your child to school close to home, away from home, those types of things. You have to think about the cost of living in the city in which you're sending them to, things of that nature. So just to define those a little further, when we're thinking about direct costs, every student has to pay tuition. That's the amount just to be educated and receive a degree from that school. So it's really the cost of your education. For those of you that are, at a private school, K through 12 or through high school, obviously you've been paying for education right now, but that's a really big change for those of us using public schools because we're not used to paying for education. So this would be an additional cost to your family. Housing or room, it's called one or the other, that is the price of the cost related to living on campus. It might include laundry, it may not. It usually includes all of those expenses that we pay as adults for our own kind of home, things like Wi-Fi, garbage, water, electricity. Those are all included in that housing charge. So housing would only be a cost you would pay if you're living on the college campus. So obviously if you're commuting or staying at home, you wouldn't be charged a housing cost. Board or meal plans, that's the cost of eating on a college campus. So obviously if you're living there, there's usually a required cost of a meal plan because we want to make sure we're being fed and we don't have enough kitchens potentially for every student. But sometimes even commuter students will buy lunch or want some sort of meal plan at a university. So most schools do have a commuter dining plan. So it's just important to think about that as well, whether you live on campus or not. And that's why we separate those two. And then there's mandatory fees. So there are fees associated with services on a college campus. So that could be the health center, it could be the fitness center, tutoring services, printing costs. It also could be things like lab fees if you're taking a biology or chemistry class, things like that that are associated with a specific major or coursework. So these are things that you would be billed by the university. If any of you have ever gone on a college tour yet, and the tour guide says, it's great, it's free, right? Tutoring is free here. What I want to tell you is it's not free. You're paying for it with your tuition and your fees. And so it's important that you utilize all of those services on a college campus because you are paying for them. You're just not paying extra for them on top of tuition, room, meals, and mandatory fees. These are direct costs. Indirect costs, these are things that we're not going to bill you for, but they are costs associated with going to college. Are you taking a car to school? Are you commuting? Do you have to pay for a parking pass? Textbooks, those are going to vary based on major, but you can rent or buy them used. So sometimes there's ways to save money there. If you're living on campus, do you need to furnish your dorm room at all? Are you going to start paying for your cell phone bill? Are you going to buy a laptop? There's just things, coffee obsession. That's what really adds up, to be perfectly honest, on a college campus. So start liking drip coffee. It's much cheaper, or Americanos at least. But you have to really think about just the overall costs of living and learning on campus that are beyond those billable costs. So there are indirect costs to going to college. But for this session, we're going to mostly talk about those direct costs and how to fund those. So there's multiple ways. One is through institutional aid. So what we mean by institutional aid, it's money that the university that you applied to gives to you or your student to pay for college at that school. So PLU is not going to give you a scholarship to go to another school, right? But the school is going to consider you for scholarships to, encourage you to consider them as an option. You won't know what you will receive unless you apply. So that's why it's important in those last sessions we did to really make sure you're applying to schools that you might have a chance of getting some of these scholarships if financial cost is really a concern for you. So financial aid is provided by the institution for the institution, and it's in a variety of ways. So some is merit-based. What we mean by merit is grades, test scores, if they're not a test optional institution, and potentially even a rigor of coursework, which we've talked about in some of our other sessions. So those IB, AP, and honors classes. So based on your GPA or some of those other factors, you might receive a merit scholarship from that school. Need-based scholarships. So yes, we're going to talk about those in a second as it relates to federal and state aid. But the schools sometimes also give their own need-based scholarships. So that would be family income, household size, number of kids in college. Those things are considered as they consider you for need-based scholarships. Athletic scholarships, if a school is NCAA Division I, Division II, or NAIA, they may have some athletic scholarships to give out. Talent scholarships, those are going to usually require some sort of audition or portfolio, but those would be for theater, music, art, dance, sometimes even speech and debate. And then there's also other types of scholarships. So things related to if you visit the college, they might have a visit scholarship. If you have really great leadership that you've showcased, there might be a scholarship for that. They might have specific scholarships for specific majors. So the school kind of gets to decide what types of scholarships they're giving out. And then you have to decide which ones you should apply for or how to apply for them. The biggest things that you need to think about, what you should ask those colleges, one is, are those scholarships renewable for 4 years? It's a really important question to ask, especially if it's not kind of automatically told to you when you receive that scholarship. Because it's great if you can afford the first year of college, but you also have to think about college as a 4-year commitment if you're going for that bachelor's degree. So can you afford it every other year? And if that scholarship is only renewable for 1 year or not renewable at all, you have to think about, how am I going to make that up in my second, third, and fourth year? Is there a separate application for that scholarship, and what's the deadline? This is where missing a deadline can be truly detrimental. We really want to make sure that you are getting the money that you deserve. So you got to pay attention to dates and deadlines. What are the requirements to maintain my scholarship? So some require that you don't change majors. Some require that you maintain a certain GPA. So there's certain requirements, and if you were to drop below that GPA or change majors, you may lose that scholarship. So it's important you know what those are. And then just knowing if they're need-based or merit-based helps you know if there's anything you have to fill out from year to year, because most of the need-based scholarships, even from a university, are going to require a form I'm going to talk about in a second. So those are things that you can start looking at on college websites, look at their scholarship pages, but also just start keeping in mind as you consider, what is it I can afford to college, and what types of scholarships do I need to achieve that? All right, so one of the other ways of receiving funding for college is not through the university, but through the state or the federal government, or both. So financial aid can be provided from the U.S. Department of Education, that's the federal aid, or the Washington Student Achievement Council, that's the state aid. They both have websites. You can start looking through what types of scholarships they give out, but generally they're going to require one of these two forms. For most of us, we're going to fill out the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid. It's free to fill out, very important to know. And you fill that out. Takes the average family only 24 minutes. So if you are remembering the days of you filling it out or maybe an older sibling, it has gotten better. But it does require you to do a little bit of homework ahead of time. And then to fill that out opens October 1st of a student's senior year. And then you actually fill it out every year that you're in college. If you can't fill out the FAFSA for some reason, there's a WASFA specifically for Washington State residents to still apply for need-based scholarships. So both of those are free. These are going to have, what's going to happen at the end of them, they spit out a number. It's called the EFC, the Expected Family Contribution. No one agrees with their EFC, but it's the number that the federal government says, we think this family can afford to send this student to school based on family income, household size, and number of students in college. A few other factors too, but mostly based on those things. That number is sent to the colleges you choose to send it to. So the colleges you apply to generally, you can send it to up to 9 schools and even more if you are one of those people that applies for more than 9 schools. Remember back to my other presentation, I didn't recommend that, but I know some people will. And what they do is they get that number and they basically say, okay, this student, their expected family contribution is less than the cost of attendance at our school, which means they have some need. Is there something we can do for them when it comes to scholarships or grants or other factors? So that's kind of how we use that form. So we're going to consider you for Pell Grants. That's a federal grant. So you have to file that FAFSA. The federal Pell Grant has not gone up much in forever, but it is free money to help you go to school from the federal government. The College Bound Scholarship and the Washington College Grant, which are listed here, are actually from the state of Washington. You do have to go to school in the state of Washington to receive them. So if you qualify for one of those state need grants, you really do want to consider staying in state. But you can go to a big public school, a small private school, any school in Washington that is a university or college, community colleges included, you can actually use your state grants at. So you still have a lot of diverse choices. But going out of state, you wouldn't receive that state grant because obviously it's Washington State's way of keeping you in state to go to school. But that can go all the way up to about $14,000 right now. So it is a very substantial state need grant. It's actually the best in the nation in terms of amount that's awarded. And it's awarded to both kind of low income families as well as quite a few middle class families. So they have expanded it quite a bit. And I definitely recommend at least applying to a couple state schools to see what you might qualify for, just so you have that option. So those are grants that you can apply for, and they just require one of those 2 free forms. We're also going to consider you for loans based on that FAFSA or that WASFA. So this is when people say, I'm not filing the FAFSA, I won't get anything. Well, you may not get some of the grants, but you will potentially get some of the loan or work study, which we'll talk about in a second, options. So loans, we're not going to get into the weeds of loans. That's its own session. But you don't have to pay them while you're a student. You generally have 10 years to pay them off. And they do actually max out student loans and do have options for parent loans as well. So sometimes students have to take out a combination of different types of loans. And we have loan counseling at most universities to help you manage that process. The scary stories about people taking out like hundreds of $1,000s of loans, they are definitely the minority of experiences. The majority of students take out loans that help them gain an education that they can pay off in that 10-year span, especially with some really great loan counseling. But work with the school you're interested in to find out all those tips so that you're doing it in a really smart way and that they're helping guide you through that process, because it can be really confusing for young people, especially who don't understand terms like interest rates and repayment plans and things like that. So loans is one of those options within state or federal aid. And then work study is an earned scholarship. So it does count as kind of a grant, but you do have to work to kind of earn it. And as you earn it, you get a paycheck that then you can put toward your tuition payments or direct costs at a university. So these are just some of the forms of state or federal aid, but again, you won't know what you qualify for unless you apply. So we do recommend everyone files a FAFSA or a WASFA. Then there's a third way of receiving funds to help you pay for school, and that's outside scholarships. What we mean by outside scholarships are scholarships you're receiving outside of this formalized federal government, state government process and your school that you're applying to. So these are things through your community, church, high school, national or regional organizations. They do usually require an application. They are usually competitive in nature, meaning not everyone who applies gets one. So it does kind of feel like a part-time job. And high school students are the busiest people I know. So this is hard to find time, to carve out time to apply for scholarships. But here's my tip. Say you spend 3 hours on a scholarship application. It took you 3 hours. Oh my gosh, that was so much time. And I only got $300, which doesn't seem like a lot. But you just got paid $100 an hour. That's an awesome hourly wage. So imagine if you got $1,000 or $5,000. And once you start writing a few of those essays, getting a few of those recommendations, you sometimes have a pool of them, and then you can use them for different types of scholarship opportunities. I'm going to show you some places to look. You do not have to wait till you're a senior to look for these. There are some that will require you to be a senior, but then you'll know that they're coming. You'll know what the requirements are. But some say you just have to be 14 or you have to be 16, and then they'll just hold that scholarship for you until you become a senior and decide where you're going to college. What's nice about outside scholarships is you can usually apply them to any college or university. There's not usually a college stipulation on these. So although there's a few of those out there, they're going to be ones you could take to whatever school ultimately fits you best. So they're very, very helpful to receive. A lot of these are not renewable, so they're going to help you sometimes just in your first year. So again, something to consider as you think about a 4-year commitment to college. All right. And just for some of you that joined a little bit later, there is a Q&A feature in these Zoom webinars, so you can write your questions in there if you have them. I'll try to get to all of them at the end of this, but I don't want you to forget your question. So put it there and then we'll get to those, okay? All right, so I know it says final thoughts, but we're gonna actually spend a little bit of time on this page. So there's a few tips and tricks that I want you to start looking for now. One is called a net price calculator. Every college is legally required to have one of these. I will tell you the information that's in them can be great, can be 2 years old, so you do have to use them with a little bit of a grain of salt, as they say. But what they are is it's a calculator you can find on any college website. Sometimes you have to use the search bar on a college website to find it. But you get to type in information about yourself. The more you type in, the better information you're going to get. So yes, it does require you to sometimes spend a little time on it. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you an estimate of what they think that school is going to cost for you based on need and merit. So they're going to do some of that work for you before you even apply. So it's a nice way of getting a sense of, are all colleges going to cost the same amount for me? Or are in-state colleges going to be a lot cheaper? Or are private schools actually cheaper than I thought they were? So it's going to answer some of those questions. So look for the net price calculator. You're going to find that there's great websites that have done some of the work for you. So I am not paid by niche.com or any of these schools on here. We don't partner with them. I just appreciate that they have curated information for students in a really usable fashion. So I'm clicking on this and it's bringing you, I'm going to use our page. This is specifically the scholarships and costs section of niche.com. Every school has a page like this on their website. They're going to have different amounts of information, but it's going to tell you, remember we talked about net price versus sticker price. So it's going to tell you what the average net price is as best as they can tell. It's going to give you a net price breakdown, so even net price by household income. So you'll see that maybe this school is a little bit cheaper for people who have more need, or maybe it's not. 99% of our students receive some sort of financial aid, which is great. It even links you directly to our net price calculator. So it's taken out some of that research for you, gives you a breakdown. So it kind of, you know, takes you through all of those things. And it does that for all the colleges across the nation. There's also scholarship search engines. I'm going to recommend you create a separate email address, which I know is a tip I already gave you for college searching, but I'm going to say it again, because if you create profiles on all of these different pages, you're going to start to get lots of email. And some of it's going to be really great, and some of it is not going to be great, because you're going to set up a profile, and they're going to send you scholarships they think fit. The washboard.org is nice because it's just for Washington State residents, so the competition is a little bit less. But some of these others do have local ways of searching. And these all have links on them, and I'll make sure you receive them. And you can kind of play around. You might find one of those websites you just aesthetically like better, or you like the way the profile is set up better. And so you might stick with one or two, not creating a profile on all of them. And then I really recommend you work with your high school counselor. I think that's so important that you take every opportunity you can to connect with that person, because they are going to know scholarships that students received the year before, or the year before that. They're going to know about local or regional scholarships from maybe organizations or private individuals. They're going to be able to help guide you through some of those smaller regional scholarship offerings kind of better than anyone else will, just because they've had the anecdotal experience of students before you having success in some of those programs. So if they have maybe an email listserv, or there's somebody you can check in with on like a monthly basis, they're a really great person to connect with at your high school, because they just know a little bit more than I would know even about what's regional out there and what scholarships to apply for. Okay, so I'm just looking at a few of the questions. These are about 30-minute webinars. We're almost done, unless there's a bunch more questions. And you can watch them at your own time later. So if you are in the presentation and want to go watch the end some other time, that's totally okay. I'll post them to YouTube. And then we have one that says, I received a $3,600 scholarship. Will my school subtract the merit scholarship amount awarded to me? It's a great question. What if I get an outside scholarship? Does that mean the university is going to take away their scholarships? Not usually. The only time that happens is if all of a sudden you have so much scholarship money that it exceeds the direct costs of a university. So the university is not going to pay you to usually attend their school. So in that case, they may subtract some of their money from like year one, but say that's not a renewable outside scholarship, you would see that come back year two. So it's only in the case that you were to exceed those direct costs of a university that they would take any out. So people are usually pretty gracious about that. Great question. Are there any other questions? Feel free to put them in the Q&A box, but I also always put my information there. Sometimes financial aid and scholarships is a really personal discussion because your family situation might be very different than someone else's family situation. And some of you have had really open conversations with your parents or your students, and some of you haven't. But I do recommend starting to really talk about a school needs to be a good academic fit, which we've talked about, a good social fit, which we've talked about in some of these webinars, and a good financial fit. And that's important for your student and yourself to be considering as you navigate this process. But really having kind of an open mind as you head into this, because you won't know how much a school is going to cost you until you apply and do your financial aid information, that FAFSA or that WASFA. And so although you can use the net price calculator, it's really important that if you love a school, that you go through that process with them so they can really present to you the best picture they can. So if you own a home, does it count against your financial aid is one of the questions. They don't take into account debt. So if you're like paying a mortgage, they don't consider your mortgage payment, but they do take into account assets, but not 100%. So they use a percentage of those. They do take into account like age of parent as well in terms of how close you are to retirement. So there are calculations that are built in to try to give you some benefit for those things. Some schools will require a secondary financial aid form so that you can fill in a bit more information about your financial circumstances than the one size fits millions FAFSA that the federal government fills out. So that's where that relationship with your admission counselor or financial aid office at whatever schools you're going to is going to be important through this process. Great question. This page has a way to schedule a one-on-one appointment with me, though, if you want to just talk about this even before you get into the process and kind of unpack it a little bit more. And then also the YouTube playlist will be posted. I'll try to post this webinar today or tomorrow, and I'll definitely send you an email when it's done because that's a crazy long link down there that nobody wants to write down or type in. So I'll make sure you get just a direct link to link in. So. I know this was a quick presentation, but I just didn't want to get too far in the weeds. I just wanted to give you enough information to let you know where to go. So the link to the YouTube playlist is here, and I'll email it to you at the email you use to register for this webinar. So that will be sent to you today or tomorrow. So look for that email. Also, hopefully your high school counselors will have it too if for some reason that email goes to spam. Every now and then it does when it's not it doesn't match up with your school's domain. Great questions. I'm happy some of you joined me today during this really nice Wednesday. We're ending on financial aid and scholarships. Pacific Lutheran University is actually choosing to do a set of junior webinars as well for everyone, kind of broadcast through our website. They're going to be very similar to these ones, but they are going to add in one specifically about the college-bound scholarship. So that's a scholarship you may have signed up for in middle school. And they're also going to do one about Running Start from a university perspective. We wish we got to talk to more Running Start students before they start the process, because maybe there'd be a few things they could do to help them once they get into the university. So for those of you considering Running Start or in Running Start, I would really encourage you to do that. So those are going to be offered through our own website, and I'll send you that link too if any of those are interesting to you. Again, not about PLU, just about college in general. We just want to be a resource over the summer as a lot of you are starting this college search process or maybe in the middle of it. So we hope you email or call us. I'm lucky enough to work with students in East Pierce County as well as Tacoma private schools. So you can connect with me directly, or I can help you connect with your admission counselor if it's not me. So have a great Wednesday. Keep your questions coming via email, and I'll hopefully connect with some of you soon.